Okay, all right. Hey guys, welcome to Hope It Helps. And my guest on the show today is Mr. Chris Doe. Chris, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for your time, man. I really appreciate it. So, Chris, me and you actually connected in a way I don't usually connect with my guests. So, just for some backstory, guys. So, I've been following Chris's work for a while, especially around like sales and marketing. And then I saw that he was coming to Dubai to do a workshop, and I'm like, there's no like fucking chance I'm missing that. I'm gonna kind of make sure I'm gonna go to that. And it really, those 2 days, to be honest, Chris, I'm still, especially from day two, I'm still reeling, still trying to unpack day two. The personal branding course fucked me up, man, in the best way possible, though. In the best, in the best way possible.
I apologize. I'm so sorry.
No, it's absolutely fine. It's actually it's probably one of the better things that's happened in a long time. So Chris, I'm honored to have you on the show. This is my 100th episode, so I'm honored to have
Well, congrats,
have you
man.
as the guest. Thank you for your time. Thank
100
you
is
for
a big
being on the
achievement.
show. Yeah. Wanted to save episode 100 for a special guest. That's why. So it all worked out.
Beautiful.
Perfect. All right. So Chris, before we get into everything, why don't you give all of us a little bit of background about yourself, and we'll take it from there.
Sure. Hi, everybody. In case you don't know me, my name is Chris Doe. I'm a loud introvert. In a former life, I was a graphic designer, and I made commercials and music videos for a living. And then in 2014, a friend of mine from school invited me to create YouTube videos with him, something I did not want to do, but he was persistent. He didn't take no for an answer. And here I am several years later as, I guess, an online educator, as a smaller influencer, trying to make a dent in the universe.
Yeah. And you're trying to make quite a big dent in the universe. So, guys, Chris's mission is to help 1 billion people build a life for themselves doing what they love. Was that the idea behind it?
Yeah, that's more or less it. Yes.
Yeah. I'm just curious, where did that, I want to start just by asking, where did that come from? That, that mission, how did we get to that, and how's it going?
It came from a meeting with my creative heads. We're sitting in a room, and you have to remember, this is now, I think we're late 2018, and they're confused because for most of their lives, we're making projects for other people as service professionals, doing design, animation, live action, visual effects. And they're just like scratching their head like, wait, we're an education company? What? Can you explain that to us? Like, how do we make money, boss? What do we want to do? Yeah. And they meant it in the very best possible way. So I had to explain to them now, we're in a totally different space. We're trying to, in our best efforts, to update the outdated education system that exists right now. I don't know how it's like in most parts of the world, but the United States, having high quality education is a ticket to moving up the socioeconomic ladder. And to do so, it's quite expensive. These things do not come for free. The best students go to the best schools. The best students graduate from the best schools, go on to lead organizations, find startups, and get venture capital. And so there's a definite gate in terms of access to that kind of quality education. So we want to do our part in the world and make a difference that way.
So, and you're trying to tackle traditional education. And recently, over the last month, I had a couple of recordings that have been all about, education. And I know that is something very important to you. And I know you give workshops and courses both online and around the world. So my question to you, Chris, is, because I think everyone has a different answer to this question. So I'd just love to hear what your thoughts. How would you define an education?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Okay. An education has certain quantifiable, measurable results, and that you enter where you are and you exit where you'd like to be. Mm-hmm. And it's a bridge between those 2 points. And when we look at the word educate, a word that is common to the word educate, education is educe. And educe means to draw out, not to put in. And so if you look at traditional education, it's a lot of memorization. The professor has all the answers. The professor tells you what it is you need to memorize, and you memorize those things. So it's about mostly memory. And the students, at least in traditional schools that excel, are the ones who have the greatest capacity to remember short term and to be able to take tests.
Yeah.
But those skills are very valuable in the 20th century, and they tend to lead to the most lucrative jobs and positions within organizations. But as we are in the 21st century, we have wicked problems that are not so easily solved by following a certain set of rules. And we see the mavericks, the people like Steve Jobs, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, and Elon Musk. They break the rules. They see the world in a new way. And that kind of programming no longer serves people in the 21st century. And we can see the massive amounts of disruption that the first wave had come with the internet, how disruptive that was in terms of changing businesses, the way we work, the way we talk to each other. The second wave is coming, and it's, some would argue, already here in artificial intelligence. And now all those things that the schools have been preparing you for, memorization and test taking, are completely irrelevant in this new era. And so what we have to do is we have to equip people to learn how to ask really great questions, to be critical thinkers, and to learn how to research, compare, and contrast, and to be more analytical in independent research and thinking. So the education system, if it continues the way it does, it's going to prepare people for jobs that do not exist anymore.
That's actually a really interesting point. I never noticed the difference of where we are and the skills that were required at the time compared to where we are right now in the, as you know, in the creator and attention economy. And you said something during the workshop which I loved. He's like, guys, when it comes to AI, it's like kind of like when the internet came. It's like the chessboard has been completely removed, and those who can get into it as quickly as possible to understand it are the ones who are going to win. So I guess my question to you is, if I'm someone who doesn't really know anything about AI or stuff, how do I start? What advice would you have for me to start like building into that, that new world?
Okay. The first thing is check all your biases at the door. You have to approach this with an open mind. Just remember, like those of you who are young enough or old enough, to remember that time pre-internet or pre-cell phone technology, what it was like. I remember having to carry coins in my pocket, going to a phone booth and putting things in a booth that young people do not understand. I remember a time when I had to ask my older brother, who was a software engineer, what is the internet? I literally had to ask him, what is the internet? And he tried to explain it to me. It was very confusing. And then now we live in a time where we're all connected via something that we carry in our pocket, something that's more powerful than the computers that we just had like 5 years ago. Every person has this and they're connected. So if you can think back, like if you could go back in time, like at the dawn of the internet as we know it, and there were all these business opportunities, you might have created the next Amazon or the eBay or the PayPals or whatever it is that's out there today that has dominated its sector, who has been completely disruptive. So we're living in that time now where AI is resetting the game board. And I believe it's probably in the next couple of years, we're going to probably have, I don't think this is a too big of a number, but 100,000 new millionaires made who understand how to use AI. And so we need to look at the applications of what you're doing today and ask yourself, and maybe you don't have to ask yourself, you could just ask AI, how might my industry, and you would describe it, be disrupted by artificial intelligence? How might I be aided? How might I be more efficient, effective, or innovative using AI? And then AI will tell you how. This is the remarkable part. So I don't think this has ever existed in the history of mankind before, where you have such incredible intelligence and power connected to vast amounts of data pool that every person has access to for free or for very little money per month. This is incredible. You can have a therapist, a coach, a content writer, a marketer, all for like $10 a month or $15 a month. I think that's what I'm paying right now, which is remarkable, right? So we see young people saying, I will be your human liaison, design a business that makes $100,000 a year, and I will do exactly what you say. And this person's achieving these results. So imagine every young person, 13, 14, 18 years old, asking themselves that same question with AI, doing what it says. You can see how now maybe going to college doesn't even make sense anymore. Being in school might not even make sense. You need some skills, thinking, cognitive, reasoning skills, but outside of that, you don't really need what traditional education gives you. So if you have an open mind, If you think of this as a massive, massive opportunity, the next thing you need to do is do a little bit of research. Watch a handful of videos on YouTube. They're making them on a daily basis, and you're going to see the amount of innovations happening on a week-to-week basis. It's mind-blowing. Seems like every other day I'm reading about a new company doing something that would have taken 10, 100 human hours to do, and it does it in seconds. So anybody that's going to be displaced by that needs to wake up right now. This is your moment. This is your opportunity.
Yeah. And I think what I really like about what you said is I think we need to be aware to this. Like, I think everyone needs to understand, like, this is the new phase that we're in and this is where we're going. So the ones who understand how to maximize these tools, they're the ones that are going to win in the end. But coming back to something you said about traditional education, look, I agree. Personally, if it was up to me, in a perfect world, my children would learn on YouTube. Learn whatever you want, watch it as much as you want, but if this is what you love, I want you to be an expert in that. But of course, my kids are going to go to school just like your kids went to school. So the question is, although everything you're doing is fantastic and I support it and I agree with it, how do we get to a point that, you know, that it's a genuine question of, do I go to a four-year college, like do I go to university, or do I just, you know, study my own thing and do that instead?
Okay. How old are your kids?
I don't have kids yet.
Okay, then I'm telling you right now, by the time you have kids and they're of college age, this will not even be a question anymore. It's hard for humans to see how disruptive technology can be, that we limit our imagination. So I imagine even if you had a child right now, in 18 years, you won't even have this conversation because it's already changing with my two boys. First, we need to understand something. Some kids need structure. They want structure. Some kids need the name brand recognition of going to XY school, to have that document that supports and affirms who they are. And for those people, school is a great place. Currently, it could be better, but it's a great place. So for my youngest, he's 17 right now. He's got another year of high school. My wife and I, since both children were born, had set aside a college education fund for them. And we're ready to release the funds as soon as he turns 18. He can do whatever he wants. He can start a business. He can take online courses. He can hire mentors. Whatever he wants to do, it's up to him. And the remarkable thing is, as a 16-year-old, like a year, because he just turned 17, a year ago, he was already in the crypto space, doing NFT projects, being hired to do freelance commission work for people that are my colleagues in the professional world, and they don't know he's a 16-year-old boy doing this work. He's made more than $30,000, so now he has tax problems, so he's got to file a tax return. This is the new era. This is the new economy. So I encourage both of my children, only go to school if you want to go to school. It means nothing to me. I would rather you work on critical thinking and travel the world, live the way that you want, and use the money the way that you see that's going to be most beneficial to you. Now, I realize I'm speaking from a place of privilege because my wife and I are in a place where we have means to release the college funds to our children. They don't need to get loans to go to school, and so they can do whatever they want. So if my son wants to start some kind of design firm, or he wants to create a coding academy, whatever he wants to do, I would support. The only advice I would give to him is don't put all your eggs in one basket. Make small bets versus one big gamble, because it'll give you opportunities to learn in case you fail.
Yeah. And I think you said something that I didn't consider, that we're very hard as people to understand in 20 years what this is going to look like and what the power of this new technology, how that's going to affect us. And coming on to, you mentioned critical thinking. Now, this is one thing I must say that I loved about the workshops is guys, for the record, he is like, if someone was struggling to get like an answer, Chris would be like, good, struggle more. Like, he want you to figure it out. He want you to think critically. Now, one thing that I realized on the second day when we were doing the personal branding was when we were talking about the universal characteristics of likable people, which out of those hundreds of thousands of words became confidence, vulnerability, and self-awareness. Now, my question to you is, my question to you was this: why were so many of us wrong? when we were doing that exercise, you know, I'm just like I remember you said like, think of someone. Okay, I thought of my wife. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Write down the 3
Yeah.
characteristics I did. Then I'm like, oh, every single word I wrote that was on that board is completely wrong. So my question is, why? That surprised me. It surprised me. I wasn't expecting it.
I love your level of transparency and vulnerability right now. I find it very endearing. I just want to put that out there. None of your answers are wrong. None of my answers are right. But we try to test each answer to see if they can hold true. And I think what was real interesting was I said, think of somebody that you really admire, look up to, who has this magnetic characteristic that draws people to them. So we think of popular figures and we don't think much deeper beyond that. Had I said, who are some of the most beloved, inspirational people throughout history? So now we have a larger context to compare because people are saying, this social media influencer, this celebrity I just met, right? So they weren't thinking in the entire history of humanity, who do we have to look up to? And you might say Mother Teresa, you might say Gandhi, you might say the Dalai Lama, you might talk about some poet or philosopher, and you're like, wow, those are the standards in which we should hold ourselves to, and not some of the more recent flash in the pan influencers that we're seeing today. And if we look at their characteristics, it's going to be a lot different. And then jokingly, we had the Donald Trump test. And if he can claim it, then maybe we shouldn't write it down because he's a polarizing character. Love him or hate him, you know?
For sure.
And so one of the things that we didn't think about and was hard to see in real time was how quickly can you change your mind? How malleable is your thinking? So this is often the case. I have an idea. I think it's a red ball. And no matter what you tell me, no matter what the evidence presents itself to be, I will tell you what's inside the box is a red ball. And we're not listening. We're not paying attention. We're not adapting in real time. And that's the real problem. Because I think given enough time, each and every single person would have come to a fairly similar conclusion. It's just they weren't ready to change. And that's the part. And I don't know. You have to tell me, is it cultural? It's like we believe what we believe and we're not ready to give it up. Because it was the most difficult group of the 9 countries that I went to. I'm telling you the truth here. I'm just telling you the truth. It was the most difficult group to move.
I'm so happy you said that because I was going to ask you, like, how has your experience been in other countries compared to ours? And what you're saying, by the way, that we're the most difficult and like stuck in an idea, that is like typical Arab pride mindset. Oh yeah. Like I know better and it doesn't matter what the fuck you say. I'm the one who knows better. Honestly, I'm not even joking. Like on certain things, like don't even bother. Just wasting your time. Yeah. But so with all the workshops you've done, Chris, all around the world, and I know you were an art teacher for 15 years. So your story is pretty interesting. It's a combination of formal and informal education in the sense that, okay, you went to university, you got a degree, whatever. And then you also, not only that, you became a teacher and then you changed your mind and opened, the future and the different ways to learn and so on. So my question to you is, so you had the formal and the informal. How did those 15 years of experience working as an art teacher influence the way you teach, now in the workshops that you're giving?
Very good question. I believe the years in which I spent teaching at a private art school really made me who I am. It taught me so many things I wasn't even aware of. So when we talk about working with clients are smart. Most of the times they're highly educated, they're successful. They have communication skills. They know how to manage people. They know how to lead. So working with clients, many people would say it's very difficult. So we'll put that into context. Imagine you're dealing with 8 to 10 students who are mostly visually driven, who are not great at communicating. They're still relatively young. They don't know what they want. And try working with them, where their ideas aren't even clear to themselves. And what that was an incredible training ground for me to work with people who aren't sure what they even think, let alone can find the words to express that. And so I didn't know at that time, but I'm working with them and I'm seeing where they are confused. And I learned to read nonverbal communication, body language, the subtle twitching of an eye, how somebody leans back a little bit, how someone's eyes glazes over and they have that deer in the headlights look, and you recognize it right away. Yeah. And when you work with an intimate group for 14 weeks, you can test your hypothesis. You can say like, oh, I think that person doesn't quite get it. Let's see what happens next week. And then they put up work and you see, yep, they didn't get it. I recognize that look now. And so I jokingly describe it to my friends, and they're like, this is strange, Chris, but I've built psychological profiles of different types of people. I recognize certain patterns, and if you see enough of something, you start to make connections. And so now when I talk to a client or when I'm teaching a workshop, I've seen that expression before. I've heard that tone change in someone's voice before. I think I know what it means, and oftentimes, about 85% of the times, I'm right. So I always kind of approach it with a little reservation, like maybe I'm right, but maybe I'm wrong. Let me just ask a few more questions to see where this is going. So the ability to think on your feet, to respond to a dynamic learning environment, especially with 100 Arabs that I've not met before, it's like, it was wild. And I'm not saying just with you guys, because the Londoners were crazy too. Each group brought specific energy, and I'm not saying one is better or the other, but it was really fun to work with. Now, comedians call this crowd work. Are you familiar with this term, crowd work?
I think so, but elaborate on that, please.
Okay. Yeah. So crowd work is like, they don't have set material. They just go in and just say, ma'am, where are you from? How old are you? Are you guys dating or are you single? And then they just go into it and they make stories out of this. And the ones who can think on their feet are beloved, because that requires true intelligence, wit, and just thinking really fast on your feet. I'm personally fascinated by this. In a different life, if I wasn't so introverted, I might have been a comic, because I just admire the work that they do. Yeah. So my version of that in a workshop is, I have a prompt. What do y'all think? And then there's the push and pull. And then there's the funny group, the loud group, the quiet group, the angry group. And I love working with them. And as long as everybody comes in with that spirit of like, let's have some fun, we'll learn something, we'll have some valuable tools, then it's like, I want to make the learning experience dynamic. Yeah.
Yeah. And I will say, after now attending 2 of the workshops, it really is that I really liked how, I like how you just wouldn't give us the answer, you know, even though even at times I was like, oh, for fuck's sake, Chris, just like, tell us. But like,
yeah, can you put me out of my misery? Just kill me now, please.
Yeah, just tell us. Painful. Because especially when we were doing the characteristics, we were around for an hour until we got like to anything. And one thing that I'm curious, how is it from your perspective? So I can tell you my perspective as, you know, the attendee. How is your perspective like in Dubai? What were you experiencing? What was maybe challenging for you? What did you enjoy? I'm sure there was some clear challenges, but I'm curious to hear from you.
Yes, and I will say this, okay? I don't want the workshops to be point A to Z and it's just a straight line. That's really boring, because I could just make a video and then you guys can just watch it and do the work, and you're mindless zombies. I expect each group, even within the same city, to bring different energy, different reservations, different limiting beliefs, different forms of like what you think would be funny. And so I like working with the crowd. Now, I'll ask you this question. There were 100 people in each workshop.
Yeah.
And when we struggle through trying to find the answer together, what I found really interesting about this group was they would not give up. So A, they were stubborn, but B, they just wouldn't give up, because I'm like, no, that's not it. And I'm like, let me finish. They're like, no, I have another answer. Allow me to speak, because I know what it's going to be. So you have this dogged determination. Like, you know what? We've been punched 100 times, but 101, I'm going to be right this time.
That's all we need.
I admire that. It's cultural. You know, it's very different. You're not a timid culture. You're going to say what you're going to say, and you believe what you believe. So I love that.
True.
But the question I want to ask you is this, does working through the answer of suffering, and it could be like crawling on glass at times, did you find that when the answer was revealed that it was more rewarding, like you earned it a little bit?
100%. 100%.
Then it's worth it to me. Then I love it.
Yeah.
Because if I just told you A, B, and C, you're like, okay, I don't believe you.
Yeah.
I just don't believe you. You didn't take me along the journey with you. And so therefore I just don't believe that is the answer.
Yeah. And on that point, we were like 100 people, you know, each day. If it was up to me personally, I would have preferred less people, just so you can have so you can just focus a little bit more. But one thing that I'm telling you, as I said at the beginning of the show, the personal branding day, it's still fucking with my head, Chris. You have no idea. Like, I think about it all the time, every day. It's PTSD. I do, I swear. And the thing is, as time has gone on, like I've learned a lot of things like about myself, about like things you're talking about, like how to find your audience, who is my audience, what is the brand, what does it mean. So it was unbelievably useful, and it's still coming together. But my question to you is this: you got us that day to really go deep. Whoever actually wanted to do the work went deep into themselves to understand what's the shadow word, or what's blocking them. So my question to you is, why is that something that was so, and from your perspective, so important for us to do in order to develop our true personal brand?
So in another life, besides being a comic, I was probably a therapist, a psychologist, right? And so I'm trying to get you to have honest conversation with yourself, because once that's open and unlocked, I think everything can happen, and it could be the most amazing thing. Having been on social media for like a little over a decade now, I see the same patterns happening everywhere I go. People are afraid of showing up as themselves. We talk about the whole human. They're showing up as the human with a whole, as this empty void. It's because no matter how good our parents are, and I'm speaking for myself here, no parent is perfect. No one can give you as much love as you need. No one can have infinite patience and just show you the guiding light all the time. And so as we're young people, we're very fragile, and the smallest little thing can turn into a gigantic traumatic experience that you carry with you for the rest of your life. So what I find is I can teach you how to do the content stuff and how to write stuff that is going to attract people. But if you're still hurting, if you have unresolved trauma, little trauma, big trauma, whatever it is, you're never going to show up as who you were supposed to be. And I think this is the thing. Your mission, your purpose, your singular purpose in life is to get comfortable with who you are so that you can find your gift, and then you share that gift with the world. So we all have a gift. And I don't care if you believe in one God, multiple gods, the universe, cosmic energy, whatever it is. I believe that rare combination of DNA that you inherited from your mom and your dad, and you were born into this world, gives you certain advantages that most of us just overlook, never explore for a number of different reasons. And now as adults, we got to go find that thing again. We have to rediscover it within ourselves. Like, what is my gift? And when you find that, your whole energy will be aligned around this, and you'll be happy. I think you'll be healthier, and you'll be wealthier than you ever could imagine with the least amount of effort. So we have to do the shadow work, because part of the healing process is to understand the parts about us that we feel hurt around, that we feel shame or guilt. And when we can embrace that, when we can label it, we take back some of the power. And we saw that a couple of times, right? As soon as you can call something and label it, you kind of own it, or it owns you, and you have to make that choice. And that's why it's so difficult. And that's why so many people are traumatized by the workshop.
It was just, and something you said it, but to be fair, you said it at the beginning. You're like, guys, this is not going to be a typical personal branding workshop that you're expecting. And all of us, myself, sitting there, include like, okay, I don't know what that means, but I guess like we'll find we'll find out as time goes on. But one thing what I really liked about it. So, for example, my word was shame. You know, that was my that was my shadow word. And it was really hard. And it's funny, I actually spoke to my dad recently and actually admitted to him, like, for the first time in like 2 years, I'm like, this is what's been going on. This is whatever. I made a video about like insecurity. It's all after the workshop. And every time I'm like, okay, we moved a bit forward, but I'm still like, oh, I'm still scared, but we're moving. but we're trying to move a bit forward. We're moving. Yeah. And I guess one thing you said at the end of the workshop, which I thought was fantastic, you do something which I like people like you who change the way I think or challenge the normal way of thinking. That's my favorite kind of people, because it makes me think differently. You're talking about being humble. And in my world, the word humble was a very positive word. You know, it meant being, that's the way I wanted to approach my life. You know, be humble, not, you know, be all over the place and loud and in your face. And it was the first time someone had ever said that being humble you can actually look at it from a negative standpoint. And you talked about how strength and weaknesses are two sides of the same coin. And for every strength, there's a weakness. For every weakness, there's a strength. So when you start thinking from, you know, that mindset, how is that going to benefit you? How is that going to benefit you from a critical thinking, you know, standpoint?
Well, most of us try to just understand strengths and talk about strengths, and we ignore this whole other side, the weakness. And it creates an imbalance. And I think if we can find some balance within ourselves, it's that there's this darkness to us that if we can just wrestle our heart and our mind around, it can actually be a source of great power. And we gave examples. The most famous example that anybody can ever give is from 8 Mile, B-Rabbit, the last rap battle. And he's going to destroy the whole movie, right? It's down, and he's a stranger in an unfamiliar world. He's a white boy in a black person's world. And he's already so out of place. And the moment, and it's very clear because it's poignant in the story, in its representation, is the minute he embraces the darkness of who he is, he wins. Literally and figuratively, he wins the game. And there's something powerful. But we watch the movie, we applaud, great raps, that guy's talented, and we walk away and we forget what the lesson was. You know, the lesson was to understand what makes you tick, and those parts that we feel so sore and sensitive around, they're a great source of healing, and it's a great source of power. Now, when we look at it in a business context, because we're like, well, how does this help us? We look at Sun Tzu in The Art of War or the Bushido Way, and it almost always says the same thing, which is you cannot win fighting a conventional war if your forces are inferior. So if you have a smaller army and they have a big army, you can't go and fight their fight the way they fight. You have to say like, okay, our weakness is we're small, but smallness is not necessarily weakness. It means we're more nimble and we have to fight in different ways. So they engage in asymmetrical guerrilla warfare. They hide in the woods. They do unconventional things. They don't meet them in the battlefield. They don't square up and just fire guns at each other. They move in different ways. And that's the part that we start to understand that your weaknesses actually are a clue to what your strengths are. And conversely, the reason why humility has a certain power in many, many cultures, almost universally, is because we're like, don't focus too much on your strengths. You're being too self-important. There's a message there. You know, it gets distorted at times, but when we can understand all parts of us, both the strengths and the weakness, I think we show up and be our best selves with our clients, with our partners in life, with our spouse, with our children, with our parents, and we just feel different. And you'll notice this, and getting back to the personal branding stuff, you notice that people that are most charismatic, they have this peacefulness around them. And they draw you to them like, why are you so at peace? And I want a little bit of that energy that you have. And just being around them sets you at ease. That's the kind of thing I want for each person.
Yeah. If you're able to get that, then, you know, I think you're in a fantastic spot, because like you said, the hardest thing that we're ever going to do is, you know, fighting ourselves. We're our own biggest, you know, roadblocks and supporters. And I love what you said though about look at your weaknesses and how they can be turned into strengths. And what's interesting is also vice versa, you know, because then a lot of times I think the folks would be on like turn any strength and weakness into a strength. But also, guys, you have to remember that that strength probably has, what's the weakness? What's the opposite of that? And that kind of thinking really helped me when I've been trying to now build like my brand and who my target audience is. You got us to think about like who's the person you hate? Who's the person, the thing, like what's their characteristics, whatever. And we are going to be everything that is not that. And it was such a powerful place to start from, and it made things so much clearer when I started thinking of it like that. It was really interesting.
Yeah, you know, a lot of times when I do brainstorming, getting back to the 15 years of teaching, we approach the problem from one angle and everybody's stuck. And then you do this kind of inversion thinking. You say, okay, well, since we don't know how to solve this problem, let's look at the problem backwards. Let's look at something that we think is terrible. And from understanding that, we can then pull ideas, pull in that conceptual string, if you will, and that'll lead us to a much more brilliant place of discovery in terms of like, wow, I never thought of it like that, right? Yeah. So if we don't know how to express joy, like say that we want to design a movie poster for a film that's celebrating the beautiful things of life, and it's like everything we come up with is cliche, it's a little cheesy and corny. We're like, well, what's the opposite of that? Well, why don't we look at things that bring us great despair and discomfort? And then you come up with some ideas for that. And I'm like, well, that has something to do with this film. Then you take the opposite of that and you kind of invert that a little bit, and you can come up with some really fresh solutions. So as we know, the inner work that we're talking about, the shadow work, the shadow self, it's hard to take on head on. So we take on via a tangent, or we attack it from a different angle. And then
Yeah.
for some people, that'll be the moment where it makes sense to them. And during the workshop, we'll try a couple of different things. Maybe you got it on the first try, maybe we get it on the fourth try or the 44th try. We don't know. No judgment here. Eventually, you start to move towards what it is your truth, and hopefully you're able to discover it.
Yeah, I love, I really love what you said there about how you can start to find yourself, who you are, you know, what do you stand for, what do you think about? Because I remember before we did the workshop, people would ask me like, who's my audience? And I had like an idea based on, you know, the analytics, but but now after the workshop, I have a very different approach of who my audience is. What's my message to them? They're people like me who just are curious, who want to learn, who like the variety and so on. So it really opened my mind to like think in a different way. And this kind of comes on to something you said about, you know, how a lot of small businesses are like now, for example, in the AI space, they're the new guys, you know, they're the ones that are going to be fighting against the traditional ways and so on. And he's like, and you said something like giants sleep but we're hungry. So I guess how do you foster that mindset when you're like in, I guess, the earlier stages, you know, of your business, and you're trying to, you know, disrupt, you know, the big boys and the industry and the pushback that you're going to be getting? Why is that such a good way to be approaching it?
Well, we know this. The market leader always rests. And there was a famous advertising tagline from Avis Rent-A-Car. I think it's Avis. And it's, we're number 2, we try harder. A brilliant campaign. You know, they're not Hertz. I think Hertz was the number 1 rental car in America. So we try harder at Avis. And we respect that. So the thing is, if you're starting out, you're the underdog, you're under-resourced, you are understaffed, you don't have the same caliber of clients and processes, you know, your talent bench is not as deep. What are you going to do? Again, this is asymmetrical warfare, and you have to kind of say, well, what I can do is while they're sleeping, while they take their relationship for granted, I'm going to earn every single one. I'm going to cherish every single one, and I'm going to look at where people are complaining about the big dogs. And where there's a complaint, there's a customer who's not satisfied, who's deeply looking for a solution. If you serve them, I believe they're a starving audience, and you could just take on more business than you can ever imagine. So what you're doing is you're looking for a problem, and the giants are too arrogant, they're too slow, or they're too oblivious to what's going on. So they either think they don't need to change, they don't know what needs to change, or they know what needs to change, but there's so much in the way of them changing that it's impossible for them to. Like, for example, somewhere somebody's going to listen to this episode together, and they're going to say, well, we need to wake up higher education. We got to change our ways. We have all the money, the resources. We're way ahead. We have the facilities, the teachers, the pedigree. And they're like, but how are we going to change this? You see, even they know they need to change, but they don't because they can't. This is called opportunity, everybody.
And like you said, because they're big, to make any adjustment or change is going to take a significant amount of energy and time in order to, to do that, compared to someone else who doesn't have all those resources. I wanted to just come back to the whole education side for a little bit. And I wanted to ask you, Chris, because I know your mission is for 1 billion people, to challenge, to teach 1 billion people how to make money doing the things they love.
Yes.
And I guess I'm curious to see, you've been, I don't know when this mission specifically started, but the company's been around for almost like 8-9 years now. So my question to you is, reflecting now on the last, 9 years, what I guess are the biggest wins, and what do you still find to be the biggest challenge?
We still have a lot of work ahead of us. So much work. The biggest wins are going to surprise people, which is one person with one idea who's super passionate can make a difference in the world. So the video that we produced that seems to be the one that everybody refers to, talking about logo pricing, it's now got over 4 million views on it. And the short has 30 million views. And so I'm not saying I've taught 4 million people, but at least 4 million people have watched some part of that, hopefully pulled away something that's going to help them. And what I get all the time are messages in email and direct messages on different social platforms. Like, and they'll say something like this. It's often a guy. It's like, bro or bruh, you can't believe it, but this and this happened, and I charge this amount. Somebody literally said, I used to charge $1,000 for a logo. Now I charge $10,000, and it's all because of watching you and your videos. So I think that is something that's super empowering, and a message that I hope everyone who hears this, who can embrace this idea is, I don't care how old you are. I don't care how young you are. If you have something that you can share with the world and you give it in a generous spirit to help them, the kind of impact that you can make is immeasurable. Yeah. Immeasurable, because I also think, let's just say it's 4 million people. The 4 million people who watch the video are able to apply it, improve their lives. So maybe, you know, there's a little less stress at home and they're a better partner to their whoever they're married to or whoever they're living with, or they can support a parent who's going through a hard time financially. That's a big deal to me. And so the biggest breakthrough has always been in the smallest things that you do. And here's the weird part. You never know what that one video or that message or that tool, which one's going to hit. So you have to play the volume game. You got to just make lots of stuff. And then the internet, the world will tell you, this is the one that connects with us. And then you learn, my goodness, I need to do more of that. The big surprise to me also is that as a 100% education content company, we are growing faster and higher than we did as a service company. So last year we did about $5.5 million in revenue. We're projected to do between 8 to 10 million this year. I don't know if we'll get there, but that will then exceed the highest we ever got to as a service design company in a single year. And what's really cool is a venture capitalist, angel investors, and just friends and family have all reached out saying, do you need money? We want to support you. I'm like, I love money, but I don't need money because I don't know what to do with the money right now. So we still have a lot of work to do. So we need to grow the content part, to create more courses with more diverse instructors and things that will cover the spectrum of design and design education. And once we do that, I think then we'll have proven the business model that maybe other educators and institutions can look at and say, look, here's how they did it, and now we can do it. And that would be a wonderful thing.
So it sounds like you want to be the standard for this new form of education. Down the line, you know, people are going to refer to like, check out the future. That's how we should be doing things now.
Yeah, like I don't even know if we need to be the standard, but we're going to prototype ideas. And I'm so confident it will work that those that are reluctant is like, well, it can never be done. At least they can point to one entity and say, look, that's how they did it. We could do it. We could do it better, whatever it is. But at least now there's evidence that this is true. Yeah.
No, 100%, man. Yeah. And I love what you said about the content. So after the workshop, I, went away and have so much content that I am going to be putting out now from old podcast episodes that I haven't been released and so on. And I have a new appreciation, to be honest, for the amount of work that YouTubers and content creators actually have. It's so much more than, you think it is, and to be consistent and of that quality. And so I have a new found appreciation for content creators. And I know you guys put out a lot of content. That's how I found you. That's how the mock calls were a game changer for me. Super, super useful. So just a FYI. Chris, I just have 2 more questions for you. I want to be conscious of our time. And these are questions I ask all my guests. So first of all, looking back at your life, either personally or professionally, when I ask you the question, what are you most proud of for yourself? What would you say?
The thing I'm most proud of is my 2 children. I have a 19-year-old and I have a 17-year-old, and that they're happy, well-adjusted children pursuing their dreams, and that we're a loving family. And it's the best thing that I could ever do. And I know it's a little cheesy to say, but they're the best creation or artwork you've ever created. And I'm glad that they are who they are, and I'm lucky to be their parent.
Oh, that's a beautiful sentiment, man. You're not the only one that has mentioned, their kids on the show when I ask that kind of question, and it's clear to see. It's a very beautiful thing. So maybe one day I'll join you, but not just yet.
Yes, no rush. No rush.
And for my last question, Mr. Chris Doe, for episode 100, what is the message he'd like everyone to take home with him today?
Okay. I'm going to interpret that a little bit different. People often ask me, what's the advice I'd give to my younger self? Okay, so in case it's not been clear, let's talk about that. I try to imagine, I was 42 years old when I started making content, And several years later, before the Futur was formed, I think to myself now, what would happen if I was 20 years old and started a full 2 decades before? I was thinking, my gosh, I would be a better speaker. I'd be a better educator. The content library would be 10 times as big as it is right now. The number of lives I would have impacted would have changed. So what I want to tell everybody today is we live in this world now where it's about attention. And the best way to capture and create and leverage attention is to be a great teacher. So to put yourself out there, to create content, to share with the world the things that you know, and something that might be really insignificant for you might be a really big thing to someone else. And so I want to encourage you to do that. And the thing that's holding you back, or you're going to make up a lot of reasons, but it could be no one will care. I don't know what to say. I can't deal with the criticism. I don't have the tools and the technology. And those are all just reasons. And I think, and I want to say this, most of us want to achieve unreasonable results. And in order to achieve those results, you have to do unreasonable things. Just keep that in mind. If you want to be extraordinary, you have to put the extra into the ordinary. And so that's the message for all of you.
Man, I think that's a beautiful way, to end the show, especially that last line, we all have unreasonable expectations and we don't put in the unreasonable effort to get those expectations. Man, Chris, I wanted to say, first of all, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. You're a guest I've always wanted to have before we even, met in Dubai. I have you on like my wanted list of like people I want to have on the show. So now I get to, tick that off. I just want to thank you, Chris, for everything you're doing, for all the content that you're putting out there. Before before the workshops, which were just incredible, guys. If you have a chance, please go. Just from your content, I learned so much. Helped me change the way I do sales, change the way I spoke to clients. So I really appreciate all the content that you've put out there. It's been super beneficial to me. And of course, the workshop was, just the nice cherry on top of all that. So I just want to say thanks so much for everything you do, man. I really appreciate it. And we need more people who think differently like you in this world.
Well, thanks for having me on the podcast. It was a pleasure. I enjoyed the conversation. And thanks for so much for first of all, for being part of the workshop and the larger global community of people that we consider the Futur family, and for giving me the opportunity to speak to your audience. I know we'll be back. Because Jason's already talking about coming back. So I have a lot to learn still. And so I will prototype more exercises, more ideas, and hopefully have less trauma during the workshop and afterwards, that people will walk away feeling affirmed, empowered, ready to do what they need to do to change their life and the lives of the people they love the most. So thank you very much.
No, man, it's been a pleasure, Chris. If anyone wants to, reach out with you, work with you, find out some more information, where's the best place for them to go?
There's 2 places. One is go to the Futur website, which is the Futur, Futur, there's no E at the end, .com. You can find everything we do there, or you can just follow me on social. I'm on most social platforms. I'm at the Chris Do, and Do spelled D-O.
D-O. Yeah. And I'll make sure to put that in the show notes, guys. So if anyone has any questions, please let me know and I'll connect you with Chris. Chris, this has been a pleasure, man. Thanks so much for being my 100th guest. It means a lot to me. And yeah, looking forward to the next workshops. If I don't have any trauma left, I'm sure I'll see you there.
Just as the wounds are about to heal, I'm going to rip it apart again. So I look forward to seeing you. I'll bring some bandages this time.
Please, that would be great. I really appreciate it, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
No, it's a pleasure. Thank you, Chris.